I'm just going to keep clicking that button as people are arriving. So the sliced bread posse are showing their screen. So everybody give a wave.
Hello.
And then, of course, we have there Peter Campbell, who will be giving a little bit of a talk later on. Okay, a look at our deck. Oh, my slides aren't moving. There we go. Okay, so just what we're going to cover during this forum. So over the next couple of hours, we'll look at. I'm going to do a bit of a news summary and just tell you just a couple of bits about sliced bread and things that will be coming up. Then we'll be looking at some product demonstrations. So Phil and Jenny will be taking us through the system. So you'll be looking at some things in Sharedo that some people on the call may have seen before, other people won't have seen at all, but hopefully we'll be showing you kind of, what you can actually do with those different elements. Then we're going to hand over to Peter, and Peter's going to give us a bit of a demonstration and talk about his implementation. Then we're going to flick over to Tony and Ben, who are going to give us some very exciting information about things that you can look forward to seeing in the product coming up in the next kind of months, and also just a bit of information about deployments. And then really it's going to be over to you guys for some Q&A. So whilst we're going through this, for those of you that did attend the training, you'll be very used to this, but there is a comments button at the top of Teams. If you want to ask questions going through, by all means just fire them on. There are quite a few people from Sliced Bread on this call, so we'll be looking at that. If it's within the context of what we're talking about, then we might just interject. If not, we'll store it until the end and then we'll come back to it in our Q&A session. Okay, so the first thing we want to just take a quick look at is a bit of news. So some training dates. So training was a real success a few weeks back, and we'd like to kind of keep that momentum going. And so we're going to be running several courses, as you can see, kicking off this month, going right the way through to June. We'll send out a little bit more information. I'll keep sending the newsletters. If your newsletters aren't arriving, please just drop me an email, let me know, and I'll take a look at it with you, and we can look at why you're not getting them. But as I'm sending them out, I'll send more information about the contents of each of these training courses. Then we've got our next user forum. So the next user forum we're looking at is going to be in March. And so again, I'll send out more information about what's going to be in that forum closer to the time. And the last thing is about our new office location, which has been a very exciting time for all of us at Sliced Bread. Ben's been working really hard to get the office all kind of spruced up for us. So it's over in Alderley Edge. If you are around Alderley Edge, of course, drop in, come and have a cup of tea, look at our new offices and all the funkiness. And just to, mention that we are above a champagne bar. So, there's always a cheeky glass of champagne in there. Okay, I'm going to hand over to Phil now. Phil, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And Phil is going to give us a demonstration on portals and content pack. So over to you, Phil.
Phil's always better when he's muted, in my opinion. I think most people know Phil. So
yeah. I was just going to steal your thunder and say, I've got 20 minutes, and as Ben says, I never do anything in 20 minutes. So yeah, just let me get to grips with my PowerPoint deck. Smooth. Okay, yeah. So thanks. I'm just going to kick off. Actually, what I really wanted, you might need to use your safe word, Teresa. So yeah, I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you some of the key features in V7. In particular, I'm going to focus on really around portals. So how we design our personalized experiences around user priorities. And what we mean by that is that not only can we create these experiences around our personas, which many of us do, but these are really, our blueprints for our user groups, but we can fine tune these experiences throughout the life cycle of our transactions. And the way we think about those priorities through the life cycle of transactions, it's what's important to me as I go through these journeys. So for instance, you might have some transactions where at the beginning you're all around data collection and quality, and then as you go through the life cycle, you might be into more things like document generation and shaping agreements and doing sales or doing investigations. So Shader enables us to do that really through filters on these widgets that make up your portal. So we can do that on things like persona, as we know, but we can also do that on phase, we can do that on feature, and we can also do that on security permission. So we can do things like, hey, don't even show me this widget if I don't have the permission to generate a document, for instance. As we go through these portals, I'll show you some of the out-of-box stuff, but we'll also we'll jump into what we call master pages. This is really powerful feature. I don't know if anybody uses that, but what master pages enable you to do is to create reusable layouts for all of your portals. So if you've got some way of structuring your nav and your ribbons and your all your nav items, you can reuse that across any portal that you design. But what's really powerful about master pages is that it really abstracts away from the complexity of any of your transaction hierarchies for the user. So for instance, if you've got a parent-child relationship, like a case and a proceeding, or a plot sale with a whole bunch of children off them, it's really easy when you're designing portals for the user to get a bit lost. So these master pages enable us to stay found, and we'll deep dive into one of those. So like we say, we can do that on complex hierarchies, class actions, plot sales, things like that, or really simple ones. And I'll show you some of that stuff. Then we're going to jump into, as we go through that, we'll jump into like widgets. So we've got a collection of pre-built components in our widget library that underpin all of this stuff. So the widget library is all of the reusable content controls that we can drop on all of our portals with no code configuration. And what I'll do is I'll show you a couple of examples, but I'll also jump into really quickly the IDE. So not only is there a curated library of all these widgets, I think there's about 1,116 in total, but we've curated quite a few of those with no code config. But we'll show you where the accelerators are for creating your own. So you can, the whole extensibility about your widget library is we also provide scaffolding inside of the integrated development environment to go and do really cool stuff, like go get some data from somewhere else or present this. So the extensibility is there, and I'll show you some of the scaffolding around that. And then the final bit, which maybe Ben will touch on a little bit in version 8 and version 9, is that we've got some content packs around all of the key case types that you get out of the box with Shader. So things like deals and disputes. And these really enable you to like turbocharge your product delivery. So they include everything in there. These are road tested content packs. So all of the config, all of your portals, permissions, participants, but also all of your behaviors. So we've got workflows in there with standard patterns of action plans and things like that are all road tested and backed up with a pack. So in V8 and V9, you'll be able to see visually all of the content packs that are enabled, but I'll just show you some of that content as we go through our demo. So I'm going to get started. What we'll do is I'll just flick across here. I'm going to show us some stuff. So when we think about portals, so with the exception of all of the system ones, so like modular and document portals and sysadmin, in terms of user-focused portals, we think about two types. So we think about what we call aggregators. So these are our workbenches where we aggregate all of our work for our particular users, and we give frames of reference on top of that. And in terms of these aggregated workbench portals, we know that we can get these through modular in our list view portal editor. So this is where these live. This is our base content. Going to jump into a demo of these. So you can see that out the box, we support things like different internal views. So a case handler view. We show one with a managerial view, like operational oversight, and I'll call out some of these key widgets. And then we've got some client-facing views, so a B2B focus, so lots of transactions, managing a large portfolio, and then real personalized view around consumer. So, you know, 1 to a couple of transactions and then different things in here. So what you can see if you go in here, we can see multiple definitions that are all targeted at different personas. So you can have multiple personas targeted, and we can see that on our edit page as well. What you can also see in here is that we've got different navigation patterns. So we've got things like a hero top nav, and we've got left-hand navs and everything else. So if we jump into these, we can see what that means. So let's just jump into our business to business client and look at some of the key widgets and what you get out of the box with these kind of portals. I'm just going to log in as our business transaction. Now, you can see across the top, we can control everything, or you guys can control everything from your global nav straight through to your nav ribbon. And we can see that the hero nav is tabbed out in our key pages. We can also hang commands off these, off our top level navs, so things like, hey, go show me a folio, or go create a particular task that we've configured. And some of the things I want to just call out on here, some of the key call outs. When I go into this document vault, what we've got here is a standard chronology. We've got a page with a standard chronology widget on it, but this chronology widget takes points of interest filters. So what I can do in here is really tailor this, use the same widget, but zoom in on a particular priority. So this might be a communication hub where I'm doing things like, hey, I'm only sharing documents and emails and conversations between parties. So this is just a no-code configuration on your widget. There's other views in here, again, using standard stuff like the way we use list views, how that's presented, rolled up by primary owner, and what we see in the tree. So this is a B2B transaction portal. And then we've got the integration with the data analytics, so all the rich dashboards. And I'll show you some embedded modes to that as well. That's our B2B portal really quickly. Let's jump into our consumer portal. Let's just jump into that. Logged in. So again, this is all driven from the Persona engine. We can see this. So now across my global nav, I've not got search. So we're not expecting like large volumes of transactions, although it's good if you can do a nice cross-selling. We've got the notifications up here. We've got standard headers and footers. A couple of things I want to call out on this portal is different ways to present data that's being driven from standard things. So what we're looking here is we're looking at a standard list view. Hey, go give me a list of all the cases where I play a particular role, like I am the client. And on those list views, you also get different styles. So you can push it up into a card view, or you can have a tiled view, and you have full control over things like what data I see in these cards through the standard list view editor to say, these are the columns I want to present, even down to the actions that you can pin on these little cards. So you can say, hey, if this is an action where somebody's approving a document, you might want the approval command on this card itself. A couple of things to call out in these in this consumer portal. This is the first time we look at this matter plan view, or my life cycle, where we have full control over building out nice, rich visualizations in kind of like Gantt views, where we've got swim lanes. Again, this is all driven from list views, and we'll take a closer look at some of these as well. So across the top, my life cycle, I'm pulling out all the key dates that are particularly important on this transaction. A couple of other things I want to just call out here is these. So one of the new widgets we've got is a wiki control. It's a rich wiki control, so we can embed content. It's like OneNote for your cases that you can pin to all of your portals. And you can gather all of this unstructured data with sections and everything else. Now, what you can also do with wiki widgets is you can configure, or you can have pre-configured content. So you can develop all of your guidance and rich structures as a pre-configured widget, and then just drop that on your pages. So in here, this example, we've embedded a video in, hey, this is about your case. And we use the same widget controls for things like frequently asked questions or things like that. And then when we pin into the chronology, what you can see in here as well is a cut down version of the points of interest. So again, using the same widget with configuration to say I'm only interested in these. So this is like a communication hub with key milestones and documents and emails and comments and things like that. So we can really personalize these experiences using the same set of widgets with some additional configuration. Okie dokie. So that's a quick one at our client consumer portal. I just want to show you a couple of other widgets on here that we're going to look at, and then we'll jump into the master page. So you'll see a whole bunch of radar elements, again, rich visuals that give me insights, real-time insights into what's going on. So because I have operational oversight, I've got a team workbench that says, hey, go show me all the stuff that's going on in my team and where do I need to level out, where do I need to focus. So we'll have a look at a couple of those key widgets as well. Let's jump into our master page. I'm just going to pull up a matter so we can, or a case, so we can see what we're looking at. Cool. So our master pages are reusable templates that we can apply to all of our portals on our transactions. And what we can do is in Sharedo for our workbench. So we've spoken about workbench aggregators, but also our work type or transaction level portals. They live in the tree. So in our work type hierarchy. Slice bread. So in here. So what I'm going to show you is when you come into your work type hierarchy, let's just jump into our task. So we can enable our portals on any of those work types, any work type that you create, any of your derived types. Two things in here. When you jump into one of these, in the left-hand side, you can see on this one that there's no portal. So the portal engine is configured or switched on inside of your global features for your transaction type. So if you just quickly see this portal, you see this is off the task, but you can define a portal on any Sharedo type that you want. So a particular task type, maybe approval, a negotiation, or a decision, or a risk that you create. You can define portals, different personas, governance people coming in and reviewing that and personalize all that stuff. Now, if we go back here, one other thing with portals is you can use the inheritance of your work type hierarchy as well. So to define where the portal for this type sits. So if we look at this, I know we're going to have a look at the master page, but if we look at this proceeding, so this is a representation of some litigation, okay, some court litigation. But if we look at the portal designer, because it's enabled for this type, you can see in here that this is saying, hey, it's not defined for this small track derived type, but it's defined further up the tree. So it will inherit from its parent. So you can configure your portals at any level of your work type hierarchy and then specialize as you go. So if we jump up here, because this is the one we're looking at, we've got a case, we've got a nice, on our case, we're using our plan view to get some nice Gantt view swim lane stuff that we spoke about earlier. So you can see on here, I've got key dates and I've also got tasks. I've got some little aggregators. So these are good for things like show me all my things. You can have counters or bar charts and things like that. But what we're looking at here is I've got set procedures. So this is a child portal under the context of the case. And when I navigate there, when I've defined these two portals, it's pretty easy for a user to get a little bit disorientated in terms of, hey, now I'm on a child. So you can have multiple claims, all that kind of thing. But what you can control, especially around master pages, is this you have full control over this design. So what you see in the left-hand nav, what you see in the profile page, what you see in the ribbon, what you see, how you present your pages. So if we go and have a look at that, click on master page, I'll show you that again. So for my portal, I can define a portal. These are all my pages, but we've also got an action on here, an open portal page command. And then if we jump into one of these pages, you'll see the layout as we navigate around. Now, if we look at the master page, we're using a couple of our curated widgets out the box. So things like what our work item profile item is. So I can come in here, drop that on this tile above the nav, and I can do things like, hey, show the reference or show particular roles, all through no code configuration to say, for this transaction type, I'm interested in the buyer or the claimant or whatever role, a key roles on there. And you can see the standard left widget. So if we go to the widget library, you can search in here, but they're all categorized in our curated widget bank. And you can see in the navigation pane here, we've got a whole bunch of navigation style widgets that we can go and configure. This is a standard left nav one. But the cool thing around these master page stuff is it also has a context that you can specify. So you can see on here, I'm controlling the left-hand nav from my immediate parent. So that is a child, but I'm showing the context of my immediate parent. So where I'm sharing content and features, so things like document libraries and task lists that are all bubbling up, then I can show that on my parent. I can also show that for things like self or my closest work item. And this is, again, really powerful when you may have these nested hierarchies. So in this instance, we might have a transaction with a task, with a child, like a plot sale, and I'm an actual sale transaction. And then under that, I've got a whole bunch of things that I've got a portal for. So what this enables me to do is specify anywhere in that graph what I want to show in the left. So top level plot sale aggregator, or the orchestrator case, I can come in here and say, yeah, pick my closest matter. So these are really powerful. And as we said earlier, on our widgets that we drop on our pages, in terms of the user prioritization as you go through your journey, you can target widgets on persona. So I can say, hey, go give this to the B2B client only. But you also get these for phase. So I can say, hey, show this when it's in this particular phase, which is available on all our widgets. But the extension to this also is I can say this security driven one. So only show this if I've got this particular permission, which is really cool. So these are our master pages. And one other key thing to pull out on here is this tab nav. So again, it's a navigation widget that I can come onto here and configure. And what it will do is take all of my top level pages in my portal definition and tab them out. But we've also got this menu command, which is really cool. So I've got whole context here, a stay found, and you can control these really nice hierarchies. And once that page is set, you can apply that master page to any other portal definition that you've got, which is really cool. Okay, what I want to show you as well while we're on the widget library is I'm going to call out a couple of key widgets. So we've got our chronology, which we showed you from different styles before. So we've got a chronology widget, it's in the curated library. But the powerful thing is we can come down here and we can restrict the points of interest. So if you remember when we were on the business to consumer portal, I'm talking about creating a communication hub where it's documents and emails and comments. So you can restrict the POIs on here just through config. One of the other widgets that has given us some challenge over time is how we present data that we collect. And we've got a new, probably used this already, but if you've not, it's really good. We've got a key facts widget, which uses the data composer. So this is the same data composer that Jenny will touch on when she shows you next level document goodness. But also when you're navigating through your case type, building calculated fields, or you're building little list views on there, so things like all your participants. So you have full control over what data you go and get just using this standard control. So I can drop in, say, a table, happy days, give it a label, and then I can use my tags in the normal way to go and traverse the context browser. So go give me everything to do with this particular work item. And then I can browse its like children, its participants, all of the forms that I tag onto it, any of its key dates, any of its ancestors in the graph. I can go and get all of that data. So this is a really powerful widget that gives us full control over what kinds of data that I want to display on that portal. So there's a couple of widgets. There's a whole bunch of them. So if we go, hey, let's just show you. Go add a widget, take out the filter. You can see in here we've got 1,000 of them, and then we've got some really nice curated ones, no code. What I want to do now is just show you a quick example of where we've taken this standard content out of the box and extended it to do different things using the scaffolding. So I'll show you where that lives first of all, and then I'll show you what's possible. See?
Time check, Phil.
Yeah, cool. So in your modeler, we've got the integrated development environment, and in the development environment, you'll also see. So this is where you can really get wild with your extensibility, and you'll see that in here we support some scaffolding, out-the-box scaffolding to create your own widgetry. So things like with a designer, with a data composer, a Blade Basic, and everything else. Now, there are great things that you can do for these. So let's just go and show you some level up widgets really quickly. I'm just going to use this example. In here. Cool. So we're using like an aggregated life cycle. So if I'm looking at a portfolio, I can see where they're all up to. If I jump across into one of my case types, just show you some of these cool features. What we've got in here, we're using the scaffolding, going so well. Cool. So we're using the scaffolding and some extensions in our IDE to go and get some external data and use one of our visualizations to pin this over the top. In our PMF, we're using, again, the scaffolding to develop these Kanban views, which are really powerful. The only other thing I wanted to show you was a more embedded data analytics view where we've got some Power BI, but it's connected to the app. So you can see on here, we've got a Power BI dashboard. It's pulling into the data warehouse to get some profile of our schedule types, whether that's a risk or a decision in this instance. And then I can come in here and pull that actual schedule type from my integrated dashboard. So this is using some out-the-box stuff and some extensions to our IDE scaffolding to go and get data and go and get creative. The only final thing I wanted to show you was around packs. So I'm just going to show you the content of one, and as Ben will probably say, you can see these packs inside of version 8, version 9, what you've got in there. But if I just show you, pick on our ULR one again real quick. ULR content pack, get that loaded up. What you're seeing here is this pack includes everything that I need to get this content off the ground really quickly. So workflows, permissions, option sets, portals, scorecards, and these packs are defined in documentation. So you can pick these up and really just overlay your personal service over the top of them, but they're a really rapid accelerator to supercharge that development and delivery. So that's me.
Yeah, just to add what Phil said very quickly, I mean, I guess something that we're very conscious of, we're giving people a hell of a lot of configurability, and hopefully you've seen a little bit of that just now in terms of you can achieve some quite amazing UX, but actually it takes some time, and the same with workflow development. So at the moment, we have to help you take all the stuff that we've got in our gold demo environment and put it into your environment. But the whole thrust is basically enabling you to do more and more self-serve of what we consider to be best practice portals, best practice workflows. But in the meantime, I think we're gradually rolling out access to this, to the demo environment, so people can just go and grab stuff, see how we do it, take it away. But we're going to ease that whole journey throughout release 8 and 9. But yeah, at the moment, if you want to learn how to do something, contact Teresa or anyone else in the team, and we'll show you how we've done it and how what we consider to be best practice. But thank you, Phil. That was good.
Thank you very much, Phil. So I think, Jenny, you're up next with the new Word plugin.
Right, everyone hear me okay?
Yep.
Yeah, awesome, okay. Right, so I'm going to be spending a little bit of time today talking and demonstrating the new Word plugin. So many of you who are kind of familiar and users of ShareDo and document template users will be familiar with the ShareDo AutoDoc add-in that you have in Word at the moment. So the Word plugin is the next generation of that. And really it's designed to be both a tool for document template authors like ShareDo AutoDoc, but also for people who are actually consuming those templates at the end as well. So it's quite an exciting change in the product. So the audience for this plugin, as I said, is template authors. So it's going to give the authors the ability to, within Word, look at ShareDo content actually from within the Word document, access ShareDo, pull in things like tags, content, content blocks. And then from a document author's perspective, it's going to give document authors, so the end users, so fee earners if you're in legal world, project managers if you're in other words, but it's going to give them the access to pre-built content that they can add in as they're preparing their document. So for example, if you're in a property situation and you realise that you maybe need to add a particular clause into a contract, you'll be able to access that from a clause bank. And actually, if you choose to give those people permissions to do it, they're actually going to be able to create content blocks for themselves as well. So quite a step change. So once we fully release this, it's going to be available from the Microsoft App Store to download, and you'll be able to, subject to permissions within your organisation, get that downloaded and put into Word. So I am going to go over here and let me just close my help sessions into ShareDo. So I'm just logged into one of our ShareDo demo environments, and the first thing we do is just talk a little bit about how templates are set up for people who aren't so familiar with them. So many of you will be familiar with the document administration area of the system. And if I come down here and look at document templates here, I can see that I've got a list of all of the templates that I've got configured in the system. So I've got my Word documents here. I've also able to manage things like content blocks, so bits of preset content. So common one is a header or a footer, things like enclosures, email templates, SMS templates, multi-party document templates. So all of those are managed in here. But what I'm going to do today is focus on a Word document template, and we're going to have a look at what that journey looks like. So this is the template I'm going to be using today. So one of the first parts of configuring a document template in ShareDo is to set up your kind of metadata about that template. So that's the things that really ShareDo is concerned about rather than the actual content of the document itself. So that's things like, how am I going to send this document out once it's been configured? Do I need to have approval processes around my document? So if I'm sending out a contract, I want to go to a matter partner first for approval. And where do I want to see this document? So what's the context of it? And the document that we're going to use today has got a context of an insured loss claim. So it's a legal work type. So this is where we set up all that kind of display and approval and workflow concerns around the document. But what we're mainly going to focus on today is actually authoring the document. So creating a Word template for this document that when we generate it is going to be used to show the end user the content of that document, allow them to edit it. So I'm going to come in here and we can see that at the moment this template is pointing to this particular Word document. So I'm just going to open that Word document up. And on my laptop, it's going to open Word Online, but I'm just going to flip that into the desktop. So you will be able to use the Word plugin within Word Online. But for demoing, I'm going to do it in the main Word app. Okay, so this just looks like the templates that we have today in the application. So you can see we've already got a few tags added into this document. And what these tags will do is they'll pull content in based upon when you run it. So for example, here it's pulling in the client name. So when we actually run this in the matter, it'll say, well, who's the client for this matter? And it'll pull those in. So in the present solution, up here you have a little ShareDo AutoDoc add-in, but now over here, we've got a nice big button to ask the plugin. And the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to log in to Sharedy. So actually, when I'm working within Word, I'm actually going to log into Sharedy itself, and so it's pulling the information out of Sharedy in real time to allow me to work on this document. So I'm going to log in. I'm going to log in as a document author. And we can see now I've got some additional information here. So if I come up here to my main menu, we can see that I've got a whole list of different things that I can now do to work within this document. So this one's actually already linked, so I'm going to unlink it. But the first thing that you need to do is say, for this Word document, I'm going to link it to this template configuration in Sharedy. So you've just seen all that data that we'd set up around when we want it to display, whether we want approval processes. So it's going to allow me to link this Word document. And once you've done this once, you don't have to do it again. So I'm going to link that there, and you can see now we've got some information, and we've got all of these little areas here that are lit up because it's now linked. So the system now knows that we're working on this Word document, and it's associated with that kind of template definition that we had in the application. So what we're going to do is we're just going to work through this menu and have a look at some of the kind of things that we can do within the Word add-in. So at a very simplistic level, we can add tags into the document. So I can put my cursor where I want to add the tag, and then I'm going to go over here and click on Tag Browser. And you can see it takes me into the tag browser, the data composer. So this is similar to the area that Phil just showed you when we were looking at the portal widget. And what Data Composer does is it allows us to dynamically work out what content is available to you in this document. So we know that we're writing this document in the context of a particular legal matter. And so what this is going to allow me to do is to interrogate all of the data around that matter so that I can use that in tags. And actually within the application as well, you can not only access the data that you've generated via the way that you've configured the product, but if you want to create additional data, you can do. So for example, if you've got a name that you want to be displayed in a particular format, you can do something called a calculated field, which will allow you to specifically define that format or to amalgamate fields together. And you can do the same with lists of things as well. So you can create your own filtered lists. So I'm just going to add some basic tags in here. So I'm going to add in the title of my case. Now it's asking me if I want to put some display rules on here. So for the moment, we're not going to put those on, and we're going to do that a little bit later. So I'm going to put my tag in, and we can see I've got a nice highlighted tag here. And then let's put another tag in. So let's put this reference tag in. So we've got two fairly straightforward tags that we've just added on. And for those of you who are templating already, you'll probably already be able to see that that's a much more satisfactory journey than having to flip between the Sharedy application and the Word document to go backwards and forwards. So the next tag down here is a slightly more complex tag. So this is the matter owner. So what we're going to do is we're going to go down and we're going to find a list of all the types of participants that we can have on here. Whoops, go back up. And we're going to find the matter owner participant. So this is the person who's running that matter, and we're just going to add their name in there. That's the next tag added. So they're fairly straightforward tags. Now, what about if we've got a list of things? So what if, for example, we want to show a list of the names of all of the claimants on a matter? And within Data Composer, you can do fairly complicated things with lists. So we can have lists of particular roles on the matter, or for example, you could have a list of all of the appointments that are related to a particular participant. But I'm just going to add for the moment the list of the claimants on here. So I'm going to go back up into my Data Composer, and I'm going to find this list of claimants, which I'm going to add in. Now, because we're adding a list of things in, it's asking us how we want to add that. So do we want to just add that as a straight content control that will repeat, or maybe we want to put in a table? So I'm going to use a table. And tables are really handy if you want to kind of control formatting. And if I click into that table, you'll see now that the system's automatically taking me to the right place to say, well, you're talking about claimants. So what is the thing about claimants that you want to list? So I'm just going to simply list the names of all of my claimants on here. So if I press insert there. And so again, for those of you who are already templating, you'll see that that journey is a lot slicker than the past journey where you're having to kind of use the alt text on tables. You can just straight away add in the table and then directly put those tags into that table. And you can do all of the usual things you'd expect as well around that, for example, putting business rules around the tag. So we've got our table there now with a name in. And then next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to add in another fairly straightforward tag. So I'm going to add in the jurisdiction or the region for this matter. So this is an option set, so that's a list of values. And so I'm going to tell it that actually I want to take the name from here. And just notice that I've got this little copy button here. So I'm just going to press that copy button and I'll explain why I've done that in a moment. And you can click on the plus button and insert my tag so we can see now what the matter jurisdiction is. So the next thing we're going to do is to have a look at something called sections. So if I come back up to my main menu here, you'll see we've got this option here called sections. So what sections are used for is they give you the ability to put in blocks of text into a document, so whether it's an email or a Word document. And what you can then do is choose to conditionally display that text. So it could be, for example, that you have a clause in a property contract that's only relevant if the property type is leasehold, or it could be that you have a support ticket that you're working on and you want to put a response, and that response is only valid if the region's APAC. So it allows you to put sections of a document in that can then be conditionally displayed. And so again, what that's doing is it's reducing the amount of workload that your users are having to do, and it's allowing the system to dynamically make some of those decisions for them based on the data that they've entered into the matter. So to add a section, I click on the sections area and I'm going to say I want to create a new section, and I'm going to give that section a name. So we're going to call this EW only, because we're going to do something that's only going to be visible when the matter jurisdiction is England and Wales. And then now you can see now it's asking me for a display rule. So up until now, all of these tags will always show in the document. But what we're going to do now is tell the system that we only want this clause to display if this is a matter that's based in England and Wales. So I'm going to click on new rule here. I'm going to call my rule EW only. And that paste that I did before, that little copy button, what that did, it allowed me to copy the name of the tag so that I can use that in my expression. So I'm going to say that I want my jurisdiction to be equal to England, Wales. And I'm going to save that off. And we can see now that this section is available, but it's only going to be shown if it's England and Wales. And you can equally apply those display rules to tags or to content blocks in the system. And then finally, we're going to add in a content block. So content blocks are predefined pieces of text that have been either defined by an administrator or potentially now defined by document authors. And it can be things like contract clauses, but the most common use that we see across the board is firm headers and footers. So if you're sending out comms, you can, rather than having to define your header and your footer in every single letter that you write, you can just define it once and then people can pick up that content to use in any of the documents that they author. So I'm going to go back up to my menu here and I'm going to select content blocks. And I'm going to go down, I'm just going to select this funding rules content block. And you'll see when I select it that I can preview the content of it. And I can see some details around that. So I can see whether it's just available for template authors or whether we're going to let people who are writing documents access it. And then I have the choice of how to insert this, but I'm just going to insert this as a tag. And so that will dynamically be generated when we generate this document. And so I'm just going to save this document now. So that's our template done. Now, any time that I want to come in and edit this template, now it's linked to that definition in ShareDo. I don't need to go via ShareDo. I can just open up the Word document and I'll automatically be able to access the ShareDo functionality. So let's close that off now. And we're going to go.
move on quickly. We've got one question come in that might be a good one for everybody actually. So they're asking, are the display rules unique to the document being edited, or are they system wide? So can they define a rule once and then use it across multiple documents?
So they're just for that document at the moment. They're just for that document.
Right, thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to open up a mat now and I'm going to come in and run my document. So I'm going to go up to the prepare menu at the top and we've got our Word plugin demo document. We'll put a recipient on this. And let's generate our document. So what the system's doing now is it's pulling in all of those tags, those content blocks that we've just added in, and it's allowing the document to be generated based on what the author's specified. So we can see here that all of our tags are pulled in, we've got our list of claimants there, we've got our content block that's come in. So that's the view for a document author, but what I'm going to do now is I'm going to sign out and we're going to have a look at a slightly different view very quickly. So this person isn't an administrator, they're just a normal user. And so what we're going to do is we're going to regenerate that same document, but this time as a kind of fee earner user or a normal user, if you like. So we'll select two party again. Okay, so I'm just going to open this in the desktop app. Okay, so I'm just going to log out of the Word admin because I'm still logged in as my author and just log in as our normal user. And let's have a look at what the difference is. So this is all permissions controlled. So now that I'm logged in as somebody who's not an author, you can see that the experience is a little bit different. So first of all, this document's linking to the actual instance of the document now. It's not linking to the template, but also the view that I have in here is quite limited. So I can still browse the document and I can get to places where different tags are and I can see all the content. But more importantly, I can get to my content blocks. So if I scroll down to the bottom of the document here and click on content blocks, you'll see that all of that predefined content is now available to me as a user to add in. And we can use these kind of tags to filter and sort this so that you're only seeing the things that you want to see. And then you're also able to toggle this so that you only see content blocks that have been updated. So what's really nice is that if you start to author a document and in the time being somebody goes in and edits one of those content blocks, it will actually show up in here that this content block has been uploaded, and then you can make the decision whether or not you want to update that content block to the new version or not. So to add in a content block, I simply click on it, I get a nice preview, and then I can insert my content. Any of these as I want to into the document. So again, if I'm going through and can see that maybe particular conditions apply in a contract or there's something that needs adding in, I can make the decision to just go and get that content. Now, maybe I come across a clause that I know I need to write and isn't in the clause bank and I want to add that in. So if I just add in some additional stuff here, do as a document author is that you can actually create a new content block if you have the permission to do so. So let's call this contract section 4. And if I want to, I can put one of those little tags on. And then we can create that. And we can say whether that's going to be available for authors or document authors, who's going to get access to that. And then I can go ahead and create that. So that content block now is available not just in this document, but is available for other people to use. So from a user perspective, you can build up that clause bank, or as an organisational perspective, you can build up all of that content so that when your users are authoring their documents, that they can quickly get access to it without having to leave Word and without necessarily having to put all of that content into the template in the first instance. And if I flip back into Sharedy and just log in as a system administrator again. And if I go to my list of content blocks, you'll see now that that's been added in. And we've now got that content available for other people to use. So again, whether people are able to do that or not is permission controlled. So it's up to you if you allow certain people to do that. But it very much puts the power of creating content into the hands of the users. And it means that people can't constantly be writing that content. So I think that's it from me.
Fab. Thank you very much, Jenny. I mean, I definitely saw some stuff there that was new to me even, so that's really good. Thank you.
Yeah, just a couple of seconds there. I mean, thanks very much, Jenny. Hey, I mean, I think where we're going with this, I mean, Jenny showed a little bit about template authors and document authors. We feel we've just about rounded off the template author experience, although undoubtedly there'll be enhancements to that. We've got quite a lot of focus in the coming months now on the document author. So actually giving this out to your end users to help them particularly better manage contractual conversations. So there's some really exciting stuff coming early on in release 8, particularly for document authors and I guess all of your end users. But thanks, Jenny, that was really good.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Okay, now we're going to go all the way across the pond to Australia, where Peter, are you still with us? Peter's going to give us a demonstration about how they use the system and things that they found particularly wanted.
Sure am. Now, I don't think I can share at the moment, so somebody probably needs to just give me permission.
Who has the power? Phil has the power, I reckon. You got the power, Phil?
Phil's just doing it. I can see him squinting at his screen, so it looks like he's definitely doing it.
He's gone power great recently, Phil, hasn't he?
Well done. So the only briefing I really got was 10 minutes and be nice. So
well, we gave you 2 massive challenges, so
so that's interesting. Can you see my screen, everybody?
Yep, we can. Looks good.
Okay, so share in 10 minutes. I'll do my best because I'm not known for being brief. Not quite as bad as Phil, but there we go. So I won't dwell on this. It's a snapshot of us just so you know who we are. We're a national firm in Australia, 50% insurance and 50% other work, about 800 people. So insurance volume work's pretty big for us. And my team's about 12 people. We're called Client Solutions, which is a bit of a funny name, but it's really about trying to be that bridge between clients and lawyers to get lawyers and clients to work differently in a better way. So in other firms, we might be an arm of the IT department with analysts, developers, consultants, that sort of thing. Enough of that. So our vision when we bought Sharedy was operational excellence. Again, I won't go through the slide, but we had this huge aspiration and still have, and we're heading towards it. We want to be known for the best legal ops platform in the industry. So we wanted to be the place where clients appreciated our work and partners wanted to come and work with us and bring their teams, all that sort of stuff. And ShareDo was certainly seen as a pretty key part of that. So the reasons we chose ShareDo, just to recap, I won't really read through them, but we did a big tour of the market, and a lot of us have worked with case management systems across the legal sector for a long time. So those were the reasons we chose it, and we think ShareDo is great. In fact, what was it? It's the best thing since sliced bread, evidently. So then we embarked on the project. That's where it got fun. A 10-month go live, our original plan in 2018, I think it was, December. 2 large groups, 3 major integrations, Adirant, iManage, Exchange, shed loads of workflow, billboards of it, complex document automation, thousands of documents, and then a 2 to 3 year rollout to the rest of the firm. So with a sort of an aspiration there, working across the globe, what could go wrong? Well, reality was it did take us 2 years until the first group went live, and there were lots of product changes and enhancements needed. And so I put the little burnt toast thing up there just because I just think you call yourself sliced bread, so we could do that. But I guess the important thing to note, and here's a picture of me at a board meeting halfway through the process as well. But really, we got there in the end. We did a lot of research, actually, as we were going through this process, how long case management system implementations take. And we couldn't find a firm in Australia that had done it in under 2 years. So I think we just got the promise wrong. And I think the thing I wanted to say, even though I've had a dig at sliced bread now, is everybody stepped up to actually fix the problems, give us the extra functionality. We really underestimated all of the Australian jurisdictions. That kind of threw a spanner in the works. But what's really defining is how everybody stood up and solved the problem. Happy place. So look at the utilization now of the system. This is just a little graph of documents generated, because I'd say we love analytics, but maybe it's just me. So this is when we went live, and we can see this just amazingly stellar increase. And then things got a bit busy, and off it went. And the interesting thing is we went live in the middle of COVID, so that usually doesn't bode well for anything really. And so we've had lots of user actions, lots of documents, 76,000 tasks assigned and 72,000 completed. Quite often in case management systems, you see lots of tasks assigned, maybe not so many completed. So we're pretty happy about that. And then when we did a presentation to the board, we got some independent auditors to look at the business benefits of the project. And this, well, I've hidden the numbers. This shows our sort of graph, so we're still getting the benefits. They're just a little bit later because it took longer than we thought, but hey, this happens. So there's a number of benefits, and the interesting thing about this list, which I haven't got time to go through, but the interesting thing is the practice group actually workshopped it and presented them to us. So we thought that was really great that the lawyers got together and did that. They just decided to do it in a discussion they had. And so there's lots of good things there about supporting better ways of working and all that sort of stuff. So so we're really, really happy with how people have adopted it. So we're back to the best thing since sliced bread again.
Mm-hmm.
So now I'll talk about a couple of things. We've rolled it out into 4 groups so far. We've got another 2 big ones on the go. And so I thought I'd just touch on a couple of the areas, because not everybody's using it as well as we would obviously like. So the first group was Statutory Insurance Queensland, 45 people, lots of workflows and precedents, a very complex app. They went live in March 2020. And so those are sort of factors they had that were interesting. You know, their clients had trained them a bit. They hadn't used a prior system, so that worked in their favour. They were positive because they lived in Queensland, I think. Nice weather up there. They had good champions, which had a high degree of ownership. They were people, the champions they chose to work with us in the project were the up and coming lawyers, the ones that were really hammered and doing a really good job in the team already. They didn't just give us the dregs that weren't so busy. That was really important. They were engaged with lots of workflow and document changes, so they were always giving us change requests, and we loved that. And the key people that were involved were rewarded. They got promoted, all sorts of things happened. So we can see that of the documents generated, the lawyers actually generated 16,000 of our 50,000 at the time this graph was taken. So that's quite significant. 31,000, as you'd expect, more by legal assistants, but 16,000 by lawyers is just, it's pretty great compared to other case management systems we've been involved with. Another measure that we use for engagement is how up-to-date people are with their tasks. This has become a pretty popular way of measuring how people are up to date, and it's just a Power BI report that gives us task aging, things more than 2 weeks overdue, you know, on time, that sort of thing. And grey means it's not due yet. So this gives an idea of workload and whether people are keeping up. And this is a pretty good stat. Some of these tasks are held up for third parties, all sorts of other reasons. But we can also see, and the group identified, this person here isn't as organised as everybody else. And it was interesting because a partner rang me up one day and said, hey, it's really interesting. The system's telling us things we always thought were the case, but now it's giving us the proof so we can do something about it. So this person, maybe they're an awesome lawyer. In fact, they are, but they're just not so good at managing tasks. So they put some things in place to help them. So that's an excellent example. Then we had a not so great example. So look at their graph down here. These guys, we only delivered it for part of their work, which was high volume. Again, it was about 45 people, but they were a bit too busy to learn. They were quite junior. There's high staff turnover. There's other issues with the practice, frankly. Not that I'd say it in front of the lawyers. And they had no system prior to this either, but we think that what happens here is they're doing the work, but they're doing it largely out of the system because they're jumping out to do other matters and in to do certain matters. And so our recovery plan for them is get all of their work types in there, lean a bit more on the partner, bake it into their performance review parameters, simplify the workflows, and really just try and get them engaged. As you can see, it's sort of peaked a bit. That was when we ran a competition, and then it's trailed off. So not everyone's going to win on this journey, but we're not giving up on them. But I just thought it was interesting to see the contrast. Another group I won't really spend any time on. They're really just matter management. There's not much workflow in them, but they were pretty enthusiastic from the get-go, and there's an obsessed OCD partner that runs that group. So basically everybody's got their tasks in line except for this guy, Greg, who's, you know, there's always one, isn't there? I probably fall into that camp too, maybe. But matters with documents, we've got these nice little things that show how many documents they're generating, so we can see that they're getting value. So I guess if for the newer ShareDo people, track what your users are doing in terms of, are they completing the tasks? How many are they putting in? How many documents are they generating? Who's generating them? How outstanding are the tasks? They're really simple metrics compared to what ShareDo can deliver in a more complex kind of, or if you give it a more complex question, but it's really interesting, useful, and people take notice of it. So that's really good. A little bit on the project team that we have for each implementation, because we're running, we've probably got about another, feels like 45 groups to roll out to, because in Australia, every jurisdiction and work type is just a force multiplier. So, but for each team that we're putting onto ShareDo, we've got a lead analyst, a document automation specialist, a JavaScript developer, and a change and comms analyst. What we're really happy about is we've onboarded 2 JavaScript developers in the past year, and they've both got up to speed in less than 3 months because the documentation of how smart plans are documented and how we've sort of set them up, which we learned from Sliced Bread, it really gives them a follow the bouncing ball kind of like a good document for them to code with. And so that, unlike any other legal case management platform, it means we don't need so many rocket scientists to fill it up with content. So that's been really good. How am I going for time? I forgot to turn my stopwatch on.
No,
You're
fine.
okay, Peter.
Okay, right. So 5 key tips to finish off with, as if we don't have enough content already. The first one is analyze a lot, as much as you can. For us, it was lots of workflow in many jurisdictions and many different permutations. And that's what slowed us down, because 3 months into the project, we presented Sliced Bread with all the things we needed to do in that level of detail with all those jurisdictions. And that's when we realized, probably more so they had a problem, but collectively we had a problem. Configure with growth in mind, because you don't want to just set it up. If you're planning to roll it out to 14 different work groups, don't just jump straight in and do the first one and go live and don't think about the rest, because it's much harder to change and retrofit and adjust your master categorizations, because there's a lot of inheritance in the system. Much harder to change it than it is to set it up right in the first place. Build as little as possible. We're doing less and less for rollouts as we can, because we want a minimum viable product. And in a law firm, that's not easy, because minimum viable product is usually 150% in their view. But it's really important to build less, and then if I got in here, go with matter management first if you can. Watch how they use it, and then evolve quickly with them into workflow and more documents. So the system allows us to do that. And for Stat Insurance Queensland, our first group, they're sending shed loads of changes through, which is really good. The second tip, I suppose, is that lawyers are people too. And that's really meaning the softer side of implementing the system. I've worked in IT for a long time, and had varied success with formal change management programs, very little success, in fact. But really what it boils down to for us is you need to clarify the vision of what you're trying to do, and you need to get the stakeholders to step up to that. And for us, that meant writing scripts for partners to talk to. I mean, clearly they understood the general concepts, but the messaging we had to get right for them, and they had to practice it. And so that was important. We have to understand their position on structured task-based work models. Not all lawyers work like that. Not all people work like that. And that's been one of the biggest things we've been ruminating on in the past few months, is maybe for our next groups, we'll send them a survey as to try and determine their work preferences, so we can segment the people that are going to take to task management, which is the essence of how it's running, or not. So it's really important, we think, to understand more about what our target people are like. Discuss the processes and the change. We talked about it. Well, actually, because it took so long to get Stat Insurance Queensland running, we talked to them too much about it, probably. But that's maybe one of the reasons why they were so successful, because they had a lot of time to think about what it would mean. Prizes, competitions, bribes, trophies. There's a partner in Queensland who still carries her trophy to every meeting when we're talking about ShareDo, to prove that she's better than the other partners. And then use other leaders to sell the concept. I don't know how many are in volume work or volume insurance, but in volume insurance, you need your lawyers to be lawyers, but also they need to be people that can manage a portfolio of work. So they can't just chase every matter down as to the best of their ability. They have to do swings and roundabouts on matters to balance the portfolio. They have to fill in data for clients, all that sort of stuff. And it's probably much more prevalent in the UK because it's a bigger scale. But there are some teams in our firm that really get that. And so we got the senior leaders from those teams to come and talk to the junior and senior lawyers of the other teams and frighten them a little bit and explain how important it was, and just say, you know, if you don't do this, then our top firm client is just going to walk, because if you don't do it, someone else will. So you need to be a lawyer plus, and so you need other lawyers to sell that concept because they won't believe us. Engaging with analytics, won't say much on that, but you know, use the stats that come out of the system and create your own, and use Power BI. It's pretty easy to set up compared to some other tools we've worked with in the past. The last bit's a bit on training. Try not to drag people through lots of training courses. The system is really easy to use. The hard part is the processes and the way that your team wants to use it, and how you interact between one person and another, and how you translate what you used to do into this new environment. And so on that note, we only did 1.5 to 2 hours of system training, and we're trying to get it down to 1.5. So that's it from the training perspective. It's really just navigation, answering questions, getting past the basics. Preload the system with their matters and data to make it relevant day one, if I could spell. But that's really important too. We do that more and more. In fact, our go lives are now 2 stages. It's go live for the legal assistants, and then a month or 2 later, it's go live for the lawyers. So, I mean, the concept of saying, oh, it'll teach them really well if they have to load their data and get up to speed, is just stupid, because lawyers don't have enough time to do that. So you need to force feed some of that information. Then what was really helpful in all groups was little workshops. So it's a little sub team, and we facilitated, gave them agendas and helped organise them, and gave them morning teas so they could sit down and have little workshops about, all right, we've got this tool, this is what the firm's trying to do, how are we going to work with it? And it was that actually made a huge difference. Then we had some one-on-one coaching sessions, and this was actually instituted by the practice group themselves. And 80% of the reason for them was to show some of the recalcitrants that they weren't going to give up. And 20% was to help people with day-to-day issues, and they generally only needed to be 30 minutes. So it's really about your practice team having a clear idea of how they're going to use it, which means involving them along the way as you're building it. Because if they do, then they'll work it out themselves. Also, we learned through COVID, because we went into lockdown 3 days after we went live, it can be done remotely, and you can do all the training, you can do all the rollout. The only thing that you can't get is that list, sitting in a group and listening to the spurious conversation you hear when you hear someone sighing or talking about something. So that's the bit you miss by not being in the room, but that's not the end of the world. So you can do it remotely. And then follow-up group sessions. So with each of our groups, we meet them probably once a month, just for 15 or 20 minutes. And we just ask them to tell us what they don't like, what they do like, what they'd like to change. And we put an emphasis on the change, and we prioritize that development work. So it'll slow down a project just to get more of the changes through quickly so that we can keep the users engaged. It's about evolving always. Last point is do adopt continuous improvement. We analysed, it's a bit old now, but we analysed all of the changes that the first group gave us over a 6-month period, and 10% was don't like it, now we see it. I know we asked for it, but no, don't like it. 30% was external factors like a client or a court or something like that forced us to change a process. But 60% was really just, hey, it would be better if we did this. And so I think that's a really nice balance of things. And of course, the less you build, the smaller your little orange slice will be. I mean, actually, with this group, we built quite a bit. And the first time we showed it to them, we had probably 30 or 40% to change. But this was after we went live. So we finally, so build less. The last point I wanted to ask is reach out to the rest of the users, to reach out to me or whatever. Let's get a users group going, because I think it would be really good if we shared more information like this. I'd love to hear this similar story from other firms, whether they be legal or not, because I'm sure there's a lot we can learn from each other. And no doubt we can direct Sliced Bread to slice their bread in ways that's going to make it easier for us along the way.
Yeah,
that's it.
I think that's a really good idea, and quite clearly you didn't bribe that 10% of people enough, Peter. So you really. No, that was brilliant. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah, just quickly. Sorry, Teresa. Yeah, I mean, thanks very much, Peter. I thought that was absolutely brilliant. I mean, it is your user forum, hey. So we're going to send around a survey after it's finished. If people want to see more of this sort of thing, or focus less on features or more on features, I mean, please have your say. And yeah, ultimately, yeah, the better we can get people linked up together. So we're happy to make any introductions that you want across the whole community. Hey, that's brilliant. Hey, so thank you again, Peter. That's fantastic.
Yes.
Thank you.
Brilliant. Okay, all right. So I guess the final one from our side is over to you, Tony, to take us R8 and beyond, in the words of Buzz Lightyear.
Excellent. Hopefully you can all see some slides.
Yep.
No, I want to start at slide 1. Thank you. Okay, cool. Okay, so what I want to cover is now we're getting to the end of release 7, and release 7 we're hoping to have out towards the back end of December. I just want to make you aware of what's happening with release 8 and what we're doing in the future. So I've got 3 things I want to talk about. So the actual roadmap planning for the next 18 months has started. That 18 months is currently, we're planning it to be actually release 8, 9, and possibly even 10 as well. We're starting development in December. And the plan will take us all the way through, we think, to around about summer 2023. But there's a few things I want to talk to you about what's going to change as we get to release 8. So I want to take you through 3 things. First of all, the fact that we want your input. We've got a consultation process ongoing at the moment. And I just want to highlight how you can give us your feedback to help drive what is going on to that roadmap and what's going into the delivery plan. I also want to talk about how we're changing our release frequency post version 7 and why we're changing it, because I think it's kind of important to understand kind of what we're going to do in release 8 and how that affects how we can deliver the software to still maintain a very high level of quality. But I'll go through that in a bit more detail. And then the last thing I want to do is just try and whet your appetite a little bit on some of the things that we're planning in for release 8. There's lots and lots of features that we've planned, so I just picked out a few. But like I said, we want your input predominantly into what this roadmap's going to be. Unfortunately, mine's just going to be slides. None of this stuff that I'm going to take you through exists, so you're going to be looking at bullet points and listening to me speak, so feel free to go to sleep. Okay, so the first bit, starting with the release 8 consultation. Basically, like I said, we want your input into the roadmap. We think we've put some great new features into the roadmap, but we want your feedback to let us know whether we got that right, what your most anticipated features are, and all of that kind of stuff. So a few days ago, you should have received our release 8 roadmap consultation document. So Ben basically emailed that around to all customers to show what we've actually put into the roadmap. There's no timings on it yet because we've not actually done the delivery plan, but there's a whole swathe of features, probably about 100, if not more, that we now need to put into an 18-month delivery plan with what releases they're going to come out in. So that document, it's got literally loads and loads of stuff in it. But what we want from you is, in fact, most of the stuff that's in that document already came from your feedback, but we want more of it. We want validation of what our plan is for the next 18 months to make sure we're on the right path, that the most anticipated things are kind of at the top. So it contains loads of things, like there's some major new features in there, and I'm going to pick some of those out for you in a sec. There's lots of pain point resolutions. There's quality of life improvements to try and help you kind of configure, manage, and maintain Sherdo in a better, faster, and easier way. But if you've got any feedback, we'd like you to kind of submit that back through the usual channels, so through Teresa's team, through customer success. So just encourage you to read the document, see things that are missing, submit as your feedback. So moving on to the release cadence stuff and the frequency of our releases, because we're going to do some reasonable changes here. So once we get to release 7 in December, we're going to make changes to how Sherdo actually gets released. We're going to split it into 2 kind of release streams, if you will. What we did with release 7, just to set the context, is we're currently on 6.4412 or something like that, but we're presently doing a release every couple of weeks. So it's usually 2 weeks behind when development is completed. It goes through QA and then it's made available to clients. So that's agile, it's fast, people get features in really quickly, but we're not really dropping into that really big features at the moment. It's literally just cleaning up release 7, getting it completely stable, getting all of the features that we have to get in to move on to release 8 development. So we're able to release every 2 weeks at the moment. But as we move to release 8, that frequency is just too fast. It's not going to be sustainable because we've got major new features in development. Some of those features have got quite large breaking changes in them that we need to plan for and mitigate. Or they involve large subsystems of Sherdo being completely rebuilt from the ground up, and those kinds of things, they require a really long QA cycle compared to small feature development. So they often need full regression testing, so not just testing the new feature, but because it might have quite a spidery effect into the code, we have to do a full regression test of the entire system, how that thing works in situ with everything else. And we're talking, there's over a million lines of code in Sherdo, so we've got to, we have quite a lengthy full regression test cycle. But it's not just the testing of the functionality. We've also, when we're building stuff like that, we need to do performance testing. We need to put it through proper external penetration testing to make sure that what we're delivering is not regressing, not just in terms of functionality and bugs, but also in terms of performance and security. Last thing we want to do is release something that starts leaking data. So to account for all that, we're changing what we release and when we release it to basically slow down the launch of the major features in particular. So, as I said, there's going to be 2 release streams. There's going to be a minor point release stream and a major version release stream. The point releases, these are going to be focused on bug fixes and smaller, what we would call business as usual changes. So these BAU changes are small features or enhancements, quality of life changes that speed up how you work with Sherdo and things like that. And we're aiming roughly for monthly releases for those. It might be 1 month, 2 months, but we're aiming for a release cadence on those point releases of 1 or 2 months. So whilst those are going out and the BAU stuff are going out, in the background, we're going to be beavering away on the bigger features. And we'll have a quick look at what those features are in a sec. And we'll be delivering against a roadmap of intent. So probably with a release every 6 to 12 months. But rather than us committing to these to arbitrary fixed dates, saying that the release 8 will be 27th of July or whatever, we're actually going to work on the basis that the scope's fixed, the quality's fixed, but the time's flexible. So that way, we're ensuring that as we're doing larger new features, they're only getting to you once we are confident that they've gone through all the different test cycles that we need to do, all the different types of tests that we need to do, that performance is okay, that security is okay, so that when release 8 ships, we'll have complete confidence that we're shipping the best product that we can possibly ship. So you'll still have this stream of enhancements that's coming roughly monthly, with larger features being made available every 6 to 12 months, depending upon what scope we decide to include. But we will still be working towards this roadmap and delivery plan. When we publish that plan, so after we finish this release 8 planning, we might say we're aiming for release 8 quarter 3 next year, let's say. So we might come in a little bit earlier, or we might come in a little bit later. But whatever we do, we will be making sure that that release comes out roughly about when we said it's going to come out, but the migration path is going to be appropriately covered and the quality will be as high as it possibly can. Okay, so the key points so far are we want your feedback and we're changing the release cadence. Let's have a look at some of the new features. Like I said, there's literally hundreds of new features and enhancements in that roadmap document. So we are planning for 18 months worth of developers, and we've got like 20 developers. So we've got, 30 odd man years of work that's being planned out at the moment. I've pulled a few of the big ticket items out of that document here, which I'm going to walk through in a sec. And I'm hoping it whets your appetite a little bit. So let's start with the first one, the workflow visual design canvas. Again, I wish I had something to show you, but you're just going to have to close your eyes and imagine the things that I'm telling you and think how cool this is going to be. So you've all probably worked with smart plans, right? And you've worked with Execution Engine, and it's a really powerful way to write logic for your business processes. We've even provided like a whole set of JavaScript builders to make things simpler, but you're still working in JavaScript. It's still not really easy to define or even visualize your plans. You're still working in code land. So as we've heard, we hire JavaScript developers to do that work for you. So in release 8, we're going to introduce a new visual workflow design canvas in Modeler. It's going to let you define a plan using a visual tool. So you'll drag and drop actions onto, this is the bit where you need to close your eyes and think. You'll drag and drop actions onto a canvas, a bit like a flow chart. You'll connect them with lines. You'll add conditions and rules for which lines they follow, and you'll be doing everything visually. So for an example, taking the task stuff, you'll no longer be writing the JavaScript task builder code. You'll just drop the create task shape onto the canvas. A configuration properties window will open. You'll fill in the properties and it will do the exact same thing. In fact, under the covers, it is doing the exact same thing. It's building up exactly what you see in JavaScript today, but it's doing it through this visual tooling instead. So at runtime, you'll still have things like the process list. You'll still be able to see the execution log and all of that kind of good stuff that we already provide. But we'll also be able to take that design that you've done, so the image of your workflow effectively, and we'll be able to surface that in your Shedu work items. You'll be able to see exactly where your workflow is up to. You'll be able to see which lines it's kind of followed in the flow. You'll see what's already run, what the data looked like, and how it made the decisions that it made to get through that process, and all of that kind of stuff. But I do want to point out, even though we're going to add this new visual layer over the top, the actual JavaScript execution engine, it isn't going anywhere. It's still sat underneath that visual layer. So if you prefer to write JavaScript plans, you'll still be able to do that. This is just literally something that sits on top, lets you visualize things better, and lets you create that JavaScript without actually writing any code. So that's the workflow editor. Next up, we've got the visual forms designer. So again, like with workflow, you can actually design your custom data capture for your work items already, but it's a bit fiddly. It involves hand editing the form definition structured JSON, and then you attach that form definition as an aspect to your work type or to your ODS entity. And there's quite a lot of configuration steps to get things right. It all works, but it's not exactly the UX that we want to deliver. So we're going to overhaul Form Builder from the ground up. So Form Builder and aspects are all going to change in release 8. It'll provide this more seamless experience, and it'll all be done through the work type modeler itself. So you'll start, just to try and picture what this would look like, you'll start by defining the data structure of a work type. So specifying what fields and attributes it's going to contain and what the data types are, a bit like you're defining a table in a database. But you'll also define metadata about those fields and attributes as well. So, for example, if you're adding a new field, let's say it's a risk rating or something like that, and you define it as an int value, a number value that can be a range of 1 to 10, you'd then be able to turn on this checkbox that says, I also want to index this. I want to put it into the search indexer. When you set up the fields indexed, it's automatically then going to populate and update everything around search, and the Elasticsearch index is what drive all the searches and all the list views in Sherdo. So that'll integrate properly into that scenario. So as a result, you'll be able to take your list view and you'll be able to add proper filters to your custom fields. So maybe, I don't know, you're going to create a list that shows everything with a risk rating above 6, things like that. You can kind of do that at the moment, but searching and filtering against custom fields you've added always works as strings currently. So you couldn't do like a meaningful filter on a custom field that was perhaps a date. So you'd never be able to say, I'm going to capture this date. It gets stored into Sherdo, it gets put into the index. You then can't define a filter on your list view that says find me everything that's after 1st of October, because that data has actually been treated as a string. One of the byproducts of that, by the way, is that the index is going to be more efficient. It's going to store the data. It needs to drive search and lists based upon all that configuration. That means it's only going to need to re-index work items if something that's searchable actually changes. Whereas currently, in everything up to release 7, as soon as you change anything on a work item, it re-indexes it automatically anytime anything changes. So technically, if we define the actual schema correctly that says these are definitely the things that I want to search on, the indexer will also become more efficient, use less resources, and make less API calls back into Sherdo. Anyway, so you've defined your data structure, what the actual form will contain, what your entity will contain, and then you move on to the view designer itself. And this is where you'll define the blade that's used for editing by users. So it pops out. Currently we add aspects in, and one of those aspects might be a form builder. You'll be able to take control of the entire thing and basically drag and drop controls, labels, sections, collapsible panels, navigations, all of that kind of stuff. Just drag and drop it onto a form designer. If anybody ever remembers Visual Basic or Access, the form designer from that, it'll be a little bit like that. So you'll define all your custom sections, you'll add labels, you add your controls to it, and then you'll bind those controls to the custom data fields that you've defined. So for example, you have a data field that's defined with a type of an option set reference. It'll then let you bind that field to maybe a drop-down list or an autocomplete control, but it won't let you bind it to a date time input because it's not the right type. But ultimately, there'll be a few rules like that around it, but the form itself, how it's laid out, what appears on those, all going to be in your control. We're even going to support custom controls if you want to get really fancy as well. So Phil demonstrated the IDE very briefly before that already lets you do things like create custom portal widgets and integrate with Portal Designer. That's going to be extended to allow you to create custom controls that you use within Form Designer, and they're not going to be restricted in any way. So you can effectively say, I'm going to define a data structure that's got these 3 fields. I'm not going to put those on my form individually. I'm going to put my custom control on it, and it's going to have all the logic that I need to manage what actually goes into those 3 fields. So you could do pretty much anything that you wanted to do, even to the point where if you wanted to surface some external data, maybe from Elite or Adherent or something like that, you could define a custom control that somebody can drop onto the form that's not got any bindings, and the only thing it does is actually makes an API call in the background to Elite or Adherent to get some reference information that you want to show on the blade. Kind of the next thing I want to point out on what the form designer is going to do is it's not just about designing the blade. You'll be able to design different views too. So as many different views as you want. So if you wanted a different editor blade, for example, for different personas, you can do that. You get one for a client view, maybe one for a fee earner, maybe things like that. You'll be able to design separate views based upon persona rules. But more importantly, it's not just going to be limited to the editor blade. The same mechanic will be used to define views that you can be reused all over the place. So for example, when you do a search at the moment, you go into advanced search and you pull something back, it gives you a list of things that match, and it renders that based upon the configuration of the actual search definition itself. So they all look the same. But in theory, what we're planning on doing with this stuff is you'll be able to define the view of what it looks like on a search result. So you'll be able to drag and drop all the read-only labels and controls, bind them to the data that you've defined, and the different types that appear in the search results can have completely different views. And you can define as many different views as you want. the upshot is you're going to be out of the whole hand editing JSON world. That'll be gone. You'll be designing custom forms that are just drag and drop, nice and user friendly, and you'll have a lot more flexibility and a lot more control than before. And just one last thing to point out before I move on to the next one is, because we're building this from the ground up, we're also going to be rebuilding the runtime engine for this from the ground up as well. So at the moment, we are we use a couple of third-party libraries for actually rendering the dynamic forms that you define in the JSON in admin. That will go away. We're going to be building the actual runtime engine for it ourselves as well. And that means, because everything's in our control, we're hoping that because we've got control of all the code, the whole application should be able to speed up as a result. So when your blades are loading in, we're no longer dependent upon how long it takes this third-party dynamic form library to do stuff. We're in control of it and we can tweak it exactly as we need. And the last point is, just like at the moment, you can attach Form Builder to work item types and participants' roles, ODS entities, people, orgs, teams. We'll be supporting that straight out of the box with Release 8 as well. It'll all be fully integrated. How am I doing for time? Do I need to skip any of these?
Can I just add something? I think that this is part of the whole sort of consultation process that's going on, and certainly I'm consulting with Tony as the owner of the dev team, and basically one of my things was like, Tone, whatever we're doing, I want blades to open a lot faster. So yeah, feel free to feedback at that level or at higher feature level or whatever you want. Yeah. So, I mean, certainly that was my feedback, but the more we get, the more voices there are, but let's all vote for better performing blades, then, the better the product will fit everyone's needs. Back to you, Tony.
Yeah, no worries. How am I doing for time, Teresa?
You're okay. 5 more minutes.
Okay, 5 more minutes. Okay, I'll go through these last ones really quickly then. DMS side of things, we are overhauling it. So the key problem that we've got in DMSs at the moment is you can't configure it. So that was fine pre-modeler, where you couldn't create your own root work types, which you can now. But if you were to go into modeler now and create a new root work type called project, you wouldn't be able to associate it with a DMS. You'd have to engage us and support to be able to do that, because there's certain records need setting up in the database, and there's actually configuration for that DMS actually exists as static configuration artifacts within Sherdo, which means if we're changing it, we actually have to do a deployment. So that was fine back when we did everything for you and we configured your work types and stuff from scratch. But now it doesn't quite cut the mustard in modeler world. So Release 8, all of that configuration, in fact, the whole DMS stuff is being pulled out of the main Sherdo API, and it's going to be put in as a separate set of services that exist in the background, a bit like Indexer. So it can be scaled independently, and then Sherdo is going to talk to that. But all of the configuration for those new services will be held in the Sherdo configuration model. So you'll be able to go into modeler, into a work type, define what type of DMS it uses, how it finds its store, how it provisions it if it needs to, and all of that kind of good stuff. The whole model around DMS will change. Quickly touch on reporting. Our reporting at the moment works on the approach of, we've got the transactional system, we've got a reporting schema that we give you, and we have some processes that sit in the middle that ship data from one to the other. Now, that's great, it kind of works, but it's a bit of an old style approach these days. For starters, it's not live as it happens. There's up to a 15-minute delay before the data from transactional goes into reporting. It doesn't respond immediately to change. There can be that 15-minute delay. It also doesn't offer much in terms of flexibility, in terms of pushing data to lots of different places for aggregation and reporting. So yeah, cool, we get it to move into a reporting schema that we've defined. But what if you want to send it somewhere else? You want to send some aggregated data to a custom database that you've got maybe on Azure SQL or something, and you're just going to push some standard metrics up, and then you're going to write your own little dashboardy thing around that. You currently can't do that without engaging us and the professional services team. So all of that's going to change with Release 8. There's going to be a full revamp of how we do reporting, and it's going to be something that we're going to call the data projection framework. And the idea of this is we already do eventing in Sherdo. So as soon as anything changes in Sherdo, we already raise events. And that's how your smart plan stuff works and all of that kind of thing. So what we're going to do is we're going to take that same mechanic and we're going to put a data projection framework in the middle. So this data projection framework will be configurable. You'll be able to say it subscribes to these events and these changes. When this changes, I want this to happen, and that this to happen part is this is how I want to aggregate it, and then more importantly, this is where I want to send it. And that could be to another SQL database somewhere. It could be to an FTP file drop for all we care, or it could be to a custom API. It'll literally be able to go anywhere, and you'll be in control of what that ETL pipeline essentially does. Of course, when we ship release 8, we're not just going to lose the reporting stuff. We'll still provide you with the standard reporting schema, along with a load of pre-configured stuff around this data projection framework. But the control of where your data goes and how it's aggregated and where it's sent to will be entirely in your hands. Okay, mobile. We've been asked a number of times about a standard Sherdo mobile application, and we've always pushed back on it with the response of, hey, we give you a lot of public APIs, go and build your own that does exactly what you want it to do. There's always been a good reason for that, and that would be if I did a straw poll now between you all and say what needs to go into a standard Sherdo mobile app, you'll all give me different answers. Sherdo is so configurable and big that there's no one-size-fits-all mobile app that we could build beyond maybe some basic functionality around I want to go and see my cases. And they might not be matters depending on the client. I want to see my tasks and be able to complete them and things like that. We won't be able to do anything that's specific to your business processes, specific to your people that are out on the road going, I don't know, doing assessments or something. We wouldn't be able to provide that because it wouldn't be generic enough for all the other clients. So rather than us just pointing you at the APIs though and asking you to build your own, what we're going to do with release 8 is give you a new Sherdo mobile development framework, which it should accelerate the entire process. So it's going to be two things. It's going to be a framework of libraries that you can use to integrate an interface with all the Sherdo APIs, along with a fully functional kind of example mobile application that's going to be as standardized as we can make it. And then we're going to release that as open source. So you get the full source code to do with it as you please. And in theory, you should be able to take the app straight off GitHub and use it. But it's more likely that you'll take it off GitHub, tweak it, implement specifics to your business, and then release it that way. So by doing that, we're not going to release a mobile app that nobody's going to use because it's too generic. But at the same time, we're not leaving you out in the cold and just pointing you at the public APIs. Security. The last thing I want to pick out is the security model. So as you know, there's two security models in Sherdo. There's the way in which you manage security for your ODS entities and your operational data, and that involves putting things into walled gardens. And then on the work items themselves, it's permissions, roles based upon what roles you hold on the work item itself grant you certain permissions. And logically, that kind of makes sense because they are two slightly different security concerns. One is a lot more granular than the other, but practically, the feedback that we've got between ODS walls and normal work item security, it's a bit hard to get your head around. And if it's hard to get your head around, it means it's hard to configure. And if it's hard to configure, that means we've got clients that sometimes get incorrect configurations. So you might either end up with some data being too locked down and the right people can't see it, or even worse, it becoming too visible within the application. So we've not yet kind of settled on a design for how this is going to work. The release 8 commitment is we are going to simplify the model. In reality, it's probably going to be the case that we'll sacrifice a bit of the granularity of the security model on work items in favor of consolidating the model together so it's more similar to what we do with ODS walls. I think that's the direction we're leaning at the moment, but the key takeaway is for release 8, when we do release it, the security model of Sherdo is going to become much easier to understand, configure, and manage. Okay, so I hope that gives you a little bit of a taste of what's coming. It's just a handful of the stuff that's in that roadmap document. There's loads of stuff in there ranging from the big features all the way down to the small quality of life improvements that make your job easier. So again, please read it, please digest it, and please submit us your feedback. So in the old tell them what you're going to tell them, then tell them, and then tell them what you told them stance, I'll wrap up. So the key takeaways are we've started planning out release 8. It's going to be covering the next 18 months worth of development. So we really would like your input into that process to make sure that what we've put into that proposal document is the right things to be developing. Once we've got all the feedback on that and we've fleshed it out, that will then put that into delivery planning, with development starting in December, and it should map out to releases spanning the next 18 months all the way through to summer 2023. Please contact your CST team with feedback. The other key points were releases are going to slow down after we've released version 7. There'll still be BAU updates, but the big releases are going to slow down to once every 6 to 12 months. And hopefully you agree with us with the fact that we think there's lots of exciting new features to come in release 8 that takes Sherdo from here, hopefully right up to the next level. Thanks very much. That's it for me.
Great. Thank you, Tony. I'm very excited about a couple of those, I've got to say. Even from just a support perspective, it looks like there's going to be some good stuff kind of coming in to make our lives easier. Okay, all right, so we've kind of got 10 minutes at the end now where we're kind of just opening up the floor to you guys. So obviously it's going to take the brave person to go first. If anybody has anything that they want to ask us, and it can be about anything, obviously us as a company, the product, anything that we've kind of talked about today. There are quite a few things on the chat which I will kind of address after the meeting. I'll kind of come back to you each individually with your various points. But come on, I'm opening up to the floor. What have you got for us? And there goes that tumbleweed just behind me there. Okay, all right. So I do appreciate it is hard to just kind of put your hand up and just mention it. So let's just say after this, any update on new client wins we've got here in the chat? That might be one more for you, Ben.
Yeah, I've got I mean, there are lots of new clients joining. So there's a few that are on the NDA, but I think there's about 5 new clients who joined in the last 3 or 4 months. So you should see them at this session in March, eh?
Yeah, and we're also seeing lots of expansion in the clients that we've got as well, in terms of bringing on other work types, using other parts of the product. So we're seeing that grow as well as an organisation. So that's good. Okay, all right, Ben, is there anything that you want to say to kind of see us out, or are we giving it?
No, I mean back to my point. Sorry, this question from Linda. What is the makeup of the client customers? Sorry, Linda, what's the question?
Oh, in terms of industries, is that what you mean?
God, Linda, get yourself off mute. Oh, in terms of industries, yeah. So that's important to note. So we market, not that we do a huge amount of marketing, hey, although we start to do more. We market exclusively into legal. So in terms of our client base, it's predominantly law firms, a few legal service providers, a few regulatory bodies. Yeah, and there's a couple of insurers, and there's one of the largest companies in the world doing oil exploration. So that's sort of our client base. We're going to keep, although actually our platform isn't very legal centric, and I guess that's probably quite surprising to a lot of the law firms on here. There's very little that's legal about it. What we're focusing on is keeping the content packs as Phil described. So all of the sort of the pre-configured content, we're going to keep focused on legal for several years at the very least, I think. So yeah, that's our sector focus. I guess if there's no more questions, but you're always welcome, and hopefully, I mean, most people know us very well. Hey, I'd like to think we will always be a very approachable company, and you can have a good old rant if you want to, and request features and all that good stuff. Hey, but yeah, this is your forum, so we will be sending a survey, but feel free to feedback in whatever way you want to, in terms of how you see these sessions running. We run them every quarter. I think that's the right cadence. If you think it's too often, then just tell us, hey. And yeah, appreciate all your support, and yeah, hopefully together. We've got some new strap lines. What's the new strap line build? We're going to build a better case. I think that's it. But yeah, appreciate it, and thanks very much.
Share, yes, I think it is. So we've just had one last one come in. Will there be training sessions available to cover the new features? Yeah, so we ran quite a big training session a few weeks back, Gary, but we will, the plan, I mean, you missed it just there at the start, but don't worry, this whole session is recorded, is we're looking to deploy one of those kind of free, open to all training sessions each month. And as we see new features come in, we'll continue to do that with those as well. So yeah, absolutely, there'll be new training. Okay, all right. Well, in which case, guys, for those of you that will join in the training, I will speak to you later on in the month. But if not, for everybody else, hopefully you'll join us. I think in March is our next date we've got. So thank you all so much for joining, and thanks, guys, for your demos.
Yeah,
See
take
you.
care, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.